Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feedstuffs 365. I'm Sarah Muirhead. Day plus night cooling strategies can provide a powerful and cost-effective option against heat stress for dairy cows when they're housed outdoors. In fact, there's a recent study that was in the Journal of Dairy Science that explored day only versus day and night cooling strategies for dairy cows housed outdoors. That study also included a novel outdoor use ducted air system. So joining us today to talk about this research and some of these systems is Dr. John Gaughan of the School of Agriculture and Food Sustainability at the University of Queensland. Thank you for joining us here today. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for the invitation to present our work, Sarah.
For those of you that are joining us on Feedstuffs 365 or feedstuffs.com, feel free to post your questions. They are in the chat box on your screen. If you're joining us through our social media channels, feel free to post your questions directly in those channels, and we will make sure we get those to our guest here today. So John, we all know that hot weather can have a big impact on dairy cattle health, well-being, and overall milk production of a herd. And there's numerous strategies that exist out there for cooling cows down and a number of different ways that people are doing it, even looking at maybe some 24-hour cooling. So let's talk about why it's important to cool cows. Let's start with that very basic of why it's important to keep cows cool and why nighttime heat reduction is so critical. What should we know about that?
Okay, thanks, Sarah. I guess from an animal perspective, everyone understands the importance of keeping cows cool in terms of productivity, the welfare of the animals, the health status of the animals, and also obviously for reproduction. So cooling is a paramount strategy that we use in the summer months in the more temperate countries, but also globally where we have areas where it's hot all year round, then cooling becomes even more important. If we don't have adequate cooling, milk production will suffer, and we know, everyone knows that. I guess one of the things we've thought about for a while is actually the cost of cooling and how do we make it cost effective, how do we make it sustainable in the long run, particularly if we're using finite resources in some areas like water, for example, and we want to make sure that we are getting the most effective use of those resources in terms of cooling the animals. We found a number of years ago that one of the critical things with actually cooling livestock isn't necessarily how hot it gets during the day, but what the temperature gets down to at night. So are they actually able to dissipate heat at night, or do they accumulate that heat and then carry it over to the next day? So they start the next day already with an elevated body temperature. So the nighttime cooling idea is really around the ability to use that temperature gradient at night. So it's cooler at night. So the hypothesis was then that the cows will be able to dissipate more heat out to the environment at night than they would during the day. Cows, through the day, the body temperature goes up through eating, moving around, the environmental heat load on the animals. And if the cows really tried to keep that body temperature as constant, their energy use would be extremely high. So part of the biological component of the animal is to allow body temperature to actually go up a bit so they conserve energy and then be able to dissipate that heat out at night when that temperature gradient's there. And that works fine, providing the temperature gradient's there. So if we have a hot night, so it's humid, there's no airflow, then that gradient's not going to be as good. And so the cows aren't able then to get rid of that heat. So cooling the cows during the day is really important because it reduces that overall heat load on the animals, which is paramount. We need to do that. But coming into night, quite often people would say, well, the day's cooled off, therefore we don't need to keep these cooling strategies going through the night. And sometimes that's true. But if we have one of those nights where the THI is still above 72 or even higher, and the cows aren't able then to dissipate that heat, we lose that efficiency from the daytime cooling because it doesn't sort of carry on through the night. Our work has shown we need somewhere between 6 and 8 hours a night where the animals are under zero heat load. So they've had that capacity to dump all that heat they've gained through the day, and then are in a relaxed state through the night. So that's really where we started thinking about this, and then looking at the effectiveness or the efficiency of cooling systems at night, and can we actually enhance this cooling effect on the animals?
And you've done some research, and I think you've got some slides here to share with us.
Yep. Okay, so our hypothesis initially was around airflow. So airflow is really important for evaporative cooling. Cows like us rely on evaporation for cooling, so either through sweating or panting. And if the airflow is not there and humidity is really high, then the efficiency of those systems decreases. So we've got a large number of dairies that are feed pad based, where they've got feed pads and then the cows are basically outside, so not in a completely built environment. And obviously getting airflow from fans and those sort of things in those environments isn't always that effective. So what we did was we went back to some really old technology that had been used probably 30 or 40 years ago in the pig industry, where they use these ducted air systems to force air into piggeries and then force the air down onto the pigs. So basically what we have here is a ducted air system, and you can see in the slide what it sort of looks like. So there's a fan on one end, there's these polyurethane sheeting which is sealed at the bottom end, and then there's holes through that actually force the air down when the fan is turned on. So these duct systems are about 39 foot long. The holes in them are 3 inches wide and about 2.6 feet apart. And when the fans are on, they would just force the air down onto the cows. Because it's an outside system, we put this steel frame around the whole ducted air system, so it wouldn't get destroyed in thunderstorms and those sort of things. So it's a very simple and easy to put up system, and it's very efficient in terms of electricity use. We also had an on-site weather station, which allowed us to collect weather data 24 hours a day, basically where the cows were, and from that we were able to calculate THI. So we had 60 cows in two groups, so 120 cows in total. And what we did then was to look at this ducted system in terms of the parameters that we're interested in, were primarily body temperature, milk production, feed intake, and reproductive efficiency, which we haven't presented that part in the paper just yet. The ducted system ran from about 9 p.m. at night to 4 a.m. in the morning, and it was really set up so that when the THI exceeded 75, then the fans would be on. And in our environment, when we did this study, over the 100 days, we had something like 87 days where the system was turned on. So it was quite a hot period. So what we did was we had, as Sarah mentioned, we had day cooling and then day plus night. So it's an enhanced cooling system. So the day system was our basic normal management system, where overhead fans and sprinklers in the dairy holding yards, plus shade and fans at the feed pad. And then on top of that, we then added a wetting shower array. So when the cows left the dairy, water was forced onto them, like just walking through a shower. And then they went down to the feed pad area where they had access to the ducted forced air at night. So the distance between the dairy and the feed pad was about half a mile. So they had a bit of walking to do to get down there. So our key results were quite good, and we were quite excited by this, that we saw about a 4.5 pound increase in milk production in the cows that had access to nighttime cooling over the cows that just were cooled during the day. And so we were quite happy with that result. But more importantly was that we had a number of heat waves that came through during this period. And the impact of the nighttime cooling was greatest on the days where we had the highest THIs. So during those heatwave periods, the cows all responded about the same, but following the heatwave, the cows that had nighttime cooling were able to recover a lot faster. And over the 6 days following the heatwave, those cows that were cooled at night actually had an 8 pound per day advantage over the cows that were only cooled during the day. So very significant increase in production across the whole study, but particularly following the heat wave that came through, the nighttime cooled cows had a much stronger response. And in the overall table, just looks like this. So we measured rumen temperature rather than rectal temperature or vaginal temperature, basically because we could get 24 hours a day data from using these. And the rumen temperature is always slightly higher than rectal temperature. So when you look at these values, 103.12, it's slightly higher than we'd seen rectal temperature, but the differences between the two were also quite significant. The MPS is the mean panting score, and we use that as a indicator of cow comfort as well. So the lower the value, so 0.68 for the day plus night, means that they're more comfortable than the day cool cows. The other things we saw with this was that the cows that were cooled day and night, they had a higher dry matter intake compared to the day cooled cows. They also spent more time resting than the day cows as well. So they were more comfortable over the whole 24-hour period, not just when they had access to the ducted air. So our key summary from this was that day plus night cooling increased milk production. It lowered body temperature. We had very positive welfare outcomes, and it proved to be cost effective. So we recovered about 68% of the cost of putting this system in over the first summer. And that was 3 years ago, and the system's still in place. We're still using it, and we're still seeing very similar results to what we've experienced in the initial trial that we've done. We're still looking at aspects around this in terms of how to improve the efficiency, make it a more automated system so it'll switch on and switch off based on THI without someone having to go and actually turn the switch on and off, which will be good. And we're also now looking at the impact this has on reproductive efficiency in those cows as well. We did see positive results in terms of somatic cell count. So the day and night cooled cows had a significantly lower somatic cell count than the day cooled cows only. So before we continue, I just want to acknowledge my co-authors with this. Professor Michael McGowan and Dr. Kira Sharman, you can see there on the right with one of the cows, the EQ research dairy staff, and the number of students that helped us. But again, Dairy Australia funded this work, and without them, we wouldn't have been able to proceed.
Very good. Yeah, some significant results. That's for sure when you're doing the day plus night cooling. So is there and you may have mentioned this, but is there like a specific placement in proximity to your herd when you're doing the air duct cooling system? And likewise, how many cows can a system like that cool, with one system? What would you need to have if you've got a dairy of any significant size? Because I think you mentioned 60 to 90 cows, right, with the system that you did with your research?
Yeah, so I guess it depends on to an extent on the size of fan you want to use. So our ducted system was about 39 feet. And so we had a fan that was sort of, and that the reason we selected 39 feet was because we could put two of those systems under one shade structure. So if you have a longer shade structure, then you might have to put three in, or however you want to set it up. each of the ducted air systems were placed under the shade in the loafing area. So we wanted to move the cows away from the feed pad. We didn't want them to stain at the feed pad. So move them away to the loafing area, which is a lot more comfortable. The ducted systems then, there was 2 per shade structure, and those two ducted systems would comfortably handle 60 to 80 cows. And so we had 4 of them set up on different sides of the feed pad.
Okay, so you went different sides. You didn't put them all on one side, depending on airflow or anything like that. It was more of a just keep it every which way you could in terms of where you place
and try to get the cows to spread out as well. Because when we did our initial study with this, and we only had it on one side, the cows just all crowded on that one side. So we thought we'd better split it up so we can move the cows out as well. So it worked a lot better when we had it on both sides. Gave them some options of where to go.
So you mentioned some significant cost recovery just in that first year. So you're kind of paying for this system within less than 2 years. So can you give us any general cost or general investment that, say, a dairy would need to make to put in a system like this?
So our dairy is a 380 cow dairy, so it's only small. The total cost of doing this was around $21,000. So it wasn't a significantly high impost on the dairy at all. Running costs, because we used efficient fans, the running costs were quite small as well. So I think in terms of the overall cost structure, it really just depends on how big you want it to be and what size you need to have to get the cooling that you need for the herd size that you have. So somewhere in the vicinity between 21 and probably 40,000, depending on your herd size, is what you'd be looking at. When we have got some larger dairies that we're putting this in now, again, as part of another coming research project, which are using more of them, so the cost is going to go up a bit. But overall, under 20,000, and you'll get that recovery within that first summer. Somewhere between 50 and 70%.
And probably, I would imagine if you got to the point where they're more automated, so they would turn on and turn off based on temperature and humidity and all of that, there would also be some additional cost savings, because now it's kind of like, I'm doing something else, I'll get over there and turn those off in an hour or so. So they might be running a little more than what they would need to be running. So
yes, that's correct. So we've got there is an automated system that we've got in place now. So it just runs on THI. So we can just set it to say, if THI hits 72, turn the system on. If THI drops down to 62, turn it off. So it cycles more, and that gives us significant savings particularly in electricity costs. The other thing that we're looking at is putting Mr. fans in as well, so actually to cool the air even more. So we're looking at that as another option as well. Other people have been talking to me about using solar panels as part of their shade structure, and then storing electricity during the day to use at night. So there's a number of options around to try to reduce those costs of running the system. But we've had these structures in place now for 3 years, and we've gone through some pretty big thunderstorms and wind events, and they've withstood them. So that's good. But we're looking at other ways to basically strengthen the whole system as well.
Yeah, always good when it can make it through a storm like that. So,
It is, yes.
So when you're looking at an outdoor dairy system like you work within, what would be then, at this point, understanding you're still doing more work, what would be your recommendation in terms of, say, the most effective cooling system for producers to consider?
I think it's a combination of things. So obviously, really good cooling at the dairy is important. So when the cows come up for milking, to ensure they get adequate cooling in the holding yards, adequate cooling when they leave the dairy, access to water as they leave and they arrive for milking. Probably not walking too far, particularly during the summer months, is really important. And then really just that adequate airflow where they're going to be housed for the rest of the day in between milking. And I think, what we've seen is it's that combination of really rapid cooling at milking or prior to milking, followed by the ability of those cows to dissipate as much heat as possible at night. And that's really been driven largely by that airflow. We try to avoid water usage in the feed pad area because we don't want mud. And if it's really humid and there's no airflow, then the sprinklers that we have just don't work. They don't do the cooling to the extent they need to be. So airflow is paramount on those animals. And I should mention, when we first put these in, probably on the first day, the cows were a bit scared of them. So it was something new they'd never experienced before. But they worked out pretty quickly that this is not a bad spot to be standing.
It might be a little noisy. You might have a little fan noise, but it's worth it. So any final thoughts you'd like to leave our viewers with here today?
I think it's just important to keep in mind that, the importance of cow comfort. And, as we move forward and we know milk production is such an important component of human nutrition. And, globally, it's an expanding industry, and it's expanding into areas where the climate's probably not ideal for the cows to a large extent. So I really think it's paramount to ensure cow comfort. And obviously welfare comes into that as well, but making sure the cows are comfortable. And we can tell if they're comfortable usually by looking at them anyway. But I think, the cow is the key. If she's not looking comfortable, then something's not right, and we have to fix it. But I really think, the importance here is getting those animals to cool down at night. I think that's, if we can do that, whether we're talking dairy cows or feedlot cattle, if we can get them to cool at night, then we take that top off the next day if it's going to be another hot day, and the production benefits are there. I mean, they flow through.
Very good. I want to thank you so much for taking time with us today and for sharing your insight. And I'm sure folks will be watching for more research coming out of your team there on this topic. So thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you, Sarah. And as you said at the start, I'm quite happy to answer any questions people might have into the future.
Very good. So that's Dr. John Gaughan of the School of Agriculture and Food Sustainability at the University of Queensland. For those of you that have joined in today, we appreciate you being here with us. A reminder that all Feedstuffs 365 sessions are available on demand at feedstuffs365.com. So feel free to check those out and share those with your colleagues if you like. Until next time, for Feedstuffs 365, I'm Sarah Muirhead.